Chapter 6 of the Last Journals of David Livingstone in Central Africa from 1865 to his death. Volume 1 of 2, 1866 through 1868, by David Livingstone and Horace Waller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6. Progress Northwards, An African Forest, Destruction by Mazitu, Native Salutations, A Disagreeable Chief, On the Watershed Between the Lake and the Luangwa River, Extensive Iron Workings, An Old Nimrod, The Bois Evier, Lovely Scenery, Difficulties of Transport, Chalobe, An African Pythoness, Enlists 2 Wayu bearers, Ill, The Chitelabine, Rain sets in, Arrives at the Luangwa. We started with Chiticola as our guide on the 22nd of October, and he led us away westwards, across the Luangwa River, then turned north till we came to a village called Mashumba, the headman of which was the only chief who begged anything except medicine, and he got less than we were in the habit of giving in consequence. We give a cloth usually, and clothing being very scarce, this is considered munificent. We had the Zalanyama range on our left, and our course was generally north, but we had to go in the direction of the villages which were on friendly terms with our guides, and sometimes we went but a little way, as they studied to make the days as short as possible. The headman of the last village, Chitoku, was with us, and he took us to a village of smiths, 4 furnaces and 1 smithy being at work. We crossed the Chiniambo, a strong river coming from the Zalanyama and flowing into the Mirangwe, which again goes into Lintipe. The country near the hills becomes covered with forest. The trees are chiefly Masuko mochenga, the gum copal tree, the bark cloth tree, and rhododendrons. The heath, known at the Cape as rhinosterbosch, occurs frequently, and occasionally we have thorny acacias. The grass is short, but there is plenty of it. 24th October, 1866. Our guide Mapanda led us through the forest by what he meant to be a shortcut to Chimunas. We came on a herd of about 15 elephants, and many trees laid down by these animals. They seem to relish the roots of some kinds, and spend a good deal of time digging them up. They chew woody roots and branches as thick as the handle of a spade. Many buffaloes feed here, and we viewed a herd of elands. They kept out of bowshot only. A herd of the bama or hartebeest stood at 200 paces, and 1 was shot. While all were rejoicing over the meat, we got news from the inhabitants of a large village in full flight that the Mazitu were out on a foray. While roasting and eating meat, I went forward with Mapanda to get men from Chimuna to carry the rest, but was soon recalled. Another crowd were also in full retreat. The people were running straight to the Zalanyama range regardless of their feet, making a path for themselves through the forest. They had escaped from the Mazitu that morning. They saw them. Mapanda's people wished to leave and go to look after their own village, but we persuaded them, on pain of a Malando, to take us to the nearest village that was at the bottom of Zalanyama proper, and we took the spoor of the fugitives. The hard grass with stalks nearly as thick as quills must have hurt their feet sorely, but what of that in comparison with dear life? We meant to take our stand on the hill and defend our property in case of the Mazitu coming near, and we should, in the event of being successful, be a defense to the fugitives who crowded up its rocky sides. But next morning we heard that the enemy had gone to the south. Had we gone forward as we intended, to search for men to carry the meat, we should have met the marauders, for the men of the second party of villagers had remained behind guarding their village till the Mazitu arrived, and they told us what a near escape I had from walking into their power. 25th October, 1866. Came along northwards to Chimuna's town, a large one of Chipeta, with many villages around. Our path led through the forest, and as we emerged into the open strath in which the villages lie, we saw large ant-hills, each the size of the end of a 1-storied cottage, covered with men on guard watching for the Mazitu. A long line of villagers were just arriving from the south, and we could see at some low hills in that direction the smoke arising from the burning settlements. None but men were present. The women and the chief were at the mountain called Pombay. All were fully armed with their long bows, some flat in the bow, others round, and it was common to have the quiver on the back and a bunch of feathers stuck in the hair like those in our lancers' shakos. But they remained not to fight, but to watch their homes and stores of grain from robbers amongst their own people in case no Mazitu came. They gave a good hut and set off at once to let the chief at Pombay know of our arrival. We heard the cocks crowing up there in the mountain as we passed in the morning. Chamuna came in the evening and begged me to remain a day in his village, Pamaloa, as he was the greatest chief the Chipeta had. I told him all wished the same thing, and if I listened to each chief we should never get on, and the rains were near, but we had to stay over with him. 26th October, 1866. All the people came down today from Pombay and crowded to see the strangers. They know very little beyond their own affairs, though these require a good deal of knowledge, and we should be sorely put about if without their skill we had to maintain an existence here. Their furnaces are rather bottle-shaped and about 7 feet high by 3 broad. One toothless patriarch had heard of books and umbrellas, but had never seen either. The oldest inhabitant had never traveled far from the spot in which he was born, yet he has a good knowledge of soils and agriculture, hut building, basket making, pottery, and the manufacture of bark cloth and skins for clothing, as also making of nets, traps, and cordage. Chamuna had a most ungainly countenance, yet did well enough. He was very thankful for a blister on his loins to ease rheumatic pains, and presented with a huge basket of porridge before starting, with a fowl, and asked me to fire a gun that the Mazitu might hear and know that armed men were here. They all say that these marauders flee from firearms, so I think that they are not Zulus at all, though adopting some of their ways. In going on to Mapuyos, we passed several large villages, each surrounded by the usual euphorbia hedge, and having large trees for shade. We are on and level, or rather gently ambulating country, rather bare of trees. At the junctions of these earthen waves we have always an oozing bog. This often occurs in the slope down the trough of this terrestrial sea. Bushes are common and of the kind which were cut down as trees. Yellow hematite is very abundant. The other rocks scarcely appear in the distance. We have mountains both on the east and west. On arriving at Mapuyos village, he was, as often happens, invisible, but he sent us a calabash of fresh-made beer, which is very refreshing, gave us a hut, and promised to cook for us in the evening. We have to employ 5 or 6 carriers, and they rule the length of the day's march. Those from Chamuna's village growled at the cubit of calico with which we paid them, but a few beads pleased them perfectly, and we parted good friends. It is not likely I shall ever see them again, but I always like to please them, because it is right to consider their desires. Is that not what is meant in Blessed is he that considereth the poor? There is a great deal of good in these poor people. In cases of Milando, they rely on the most distant relations and connections to plead their cause, and seldom are they disappointed, though time at certain seasons, as for instance at present, is felt by all to be precious. Every man appears with hoe or axe on shoulder, and the people often only sit down as we pass and gaze at us till we are out of sight. Many of the men have large slits in the lobe of the ear, and they have their distinctive tribal tattoo. The women indulge in this painful luxury more than the men, probably because they have very few ornaments. The 2 central front teeth are hollowed at the cutting edge. Many have quite the Grecian facial angle. Mapuyo has thin legs and quite a European face. Delicate features and limbs are common, and the spur heel is as scarce as among Europeans. Small feet and hands are the rule. Clapping the hands in various ways is the polite way of saying, "Allow me," "I beg pardon," "Permit me to pass," "Thanks." It is resorted to in respectful introduction and leave-taking, and also is equivalent to "Hear, hear." When inferiors are called, they respond by 2 brisk claps of the hands, meaning "I am coming." They are very punctilious amongst each other. A large ivory bracelet marks the headman of a village. There is nothing else to show differences of rank. 28th October, 1866. We spent Sunday at Mapuyos and had a long talk with him. His country is in a poor state from the continual incursions of the Mazitu, who are wholly unchecked. 29th October, 1866. We marched westwards to Makosa's village and could not go farther as the next stage is long and through an ill-peopled country. The morning was lovely, the whole country bathed in bright sunlight, and not a breath of air disturbed the smoke as it slowly curled up from the heaps of burning weeds, which the native agriculturalist wisely destroys. The people generally were busy hoeing in the cool of the day. One old man in a village where we rested had trained the little hair he had left into a tail, which, well plastered with fat, he had bent on itself and laid flat on his crown. Another was carefully paring a stick for stirring the porridge, and others were enjoying the cool shade of the wild fig trees which are always planted at villages. It is a sacred tree all over Africa and India, and the tender roots which drop down towards the ground are used as medicine, a universal remedy. Can it be a tradition of its being like the tree of life, which Archbishop Whately conjectures may have been used in paradise to render man immortal? One kind of fig tree is often seen hacked all over to get the sap, which is used as bird lime. Bark cloth is made of it too. I like to see the men weaving or spinning or reclining under these glorious canopies as much as I love to see our more civilized people lolling on their sofas or ottomans. The first rain, a thunder shower, fell in the afternoon. Air in shade before it, 92 degrees. Wet bulb, 74 degrees. At noon, the soil in the sun was 140 degrees, perhaps more, but I was afraid of bursting the thermometer, as it was graduated only few degrees above that. This rain happened at the same time that the sun was directly overhead on his way south. It was but a quarter of an inch, but its effect was to deprive us of all chance of getting the 5 carriers we needed. All were off to their gardens to commit the precious seed to the soil. We got 3, but no one else would come, so we have to remain here over today. 30th October. 30th October, 1866. The black traders come from Tet to this country to buy slaves, and as a consequence, here we come to bugs again, which we left when we passed the Arab slave traders' beat. 31st October, 1866. We proceed westwards and a little south through a country covered with forest trees, thickly planted, but small, generally of bark cloth and gum copal trees, masucos, rhododendrons, and a few acacias. At one place we saw 10 wild hogs in a group, but no other animal, though marks of elephants, buffaloes, and other animals having been about in the wet season were very abundant. The first few miles were rather more scant of water than usual, but we came to the Loue, a fine little stream with plenty of water sand from 20 to 30 yards wide. It is said by the people to flow away westwards into the Loangwa. 1st November, 1866. In the evening we made the Chikamokori, a nice rivulet where we slept, and the next morning we proceeded to Kangene, whose village is situated on a mass of mountains, and to reach which we made more southing than we wished. Our appearance on the ascent of the hill caused alarm, and we were desired to wait till our spokesman had explained the unusual phenomenon of a white man. This kept us waiting in the hot sun among heated rocks, and the chief, being a great, ugly, public-house keeper-looking person, excused his incivility by saying that his brother had been killed by the Mzitu, and he was afraid that we were of the same tribe. On asking if Mzitu wore clothes like us, he told some untruths, and, what has been an unusual thing, began to beg powder and other things. I told him how the other chiefs had treated us, which made him ashamed. He represented the country in front to the northwest to be quite impassable from want of food. The Mzitu had stripped it of all provisions, and the people were living on what wild fruits they could pick up. 2nd November, 1866. Kangeni is very disagreeable naturally, and as we have to employ 5 men as carriers, we are in his power. We can scarcely enter into the feelings of those who are harried by marauders. Like Scotland in the 12th and 13th centuries, harassed by Highland Celts on one side and by English marchmen on the other, and thus kept in the rearward of civilization, these people have rest neither for many days nor for few. When they fill their garners, they can seldom reckon on eating the grain, for the Mzitu come when the harvest is over, and to catch as many able-bodied young persons as they can carry away the corn. Thus it was in Scotland, so far as security for life and property was concerned, but the Scotch were apt pupils of more fortunate nations. To change the country they were as indifferent as the Romans of the olden times. They were always welcome in France, either as pilgrims, scholars, merchants, or soldiers. But the African is different. If let alone, the African's mode of life is rather enjoyable. He loves agriculture, and land is to be had anywhere. He knows nothing of other countries, but he has imbibed the idea of property in man. This Kangene told me that he would like to give me a slave to look after my goats. I believe he would rather give a slave than a goat. We were detained by the illness of Simon for 4 days. When he recovered, we proposed to the headman to start off with 5 of his men, and he agreed to let us have them, but having called them together, such an enormous demand was made for wages and in advance that on the 7th of November we took 7 loads forward through a level, uninhabited country generally covered with small trees, slept there, and on the morning of the 8th, after leaving 2 men at our depot, came back and took the remaining 5 loads. Kangene was disagreeable to the last. He asked where we had gone, and having described the turning point as near the hill Chimbimbe, he complimented us on going so far, and then sent an offer of 3 men. But I preferred not to have those who would have been spies unless he could give 5 and take on all the loads. He said that he would find the number, and after detaining us some hours, brought 2, one of whom, primed with beer, babbled that he was afraid of being killed by us in front. I asked whom we had killed behind and moved off. The headman is very childish, does women's work, cooking and pounding, and in all cases of that kind the people take after their leader. The chiefs have scarcely any power unless they are men of energy. They have to court the people rather than be courted. We came much further back on our way from Mapuyos than we liked. In fact, our course is like that of a vessel baffled with foul winds. This is mainly owing to being obliged to avoid places stripped of provisions or suffering this spoliation. The people, too, can give no information about others at a distance from their own abodes. Even the smiths, who are a most plodding set of workers, are as ignorant as the others. They supply the surrounding villages with hoes and knives, and, combining agriculture with handicraft, pass through life. An intelligent smith came as our guide from Chimbimbe Hill on the 7th, and did not know a range of mountains about 20 miles off. It was too far off for him to know the name. 9th November, 1866. The country over which we actually travel is level and elevated, but there are mountains all about, which when put on the map make it appear to be a mountainous region. We are on the watershed, apparently between the Luangwa of Zumbo on the west and the lake on the east. The Lue or Luia is said by the people to flow into the Luangwa, the Chikugoмкore coming from the north in front, eastward of Irangwe, the same mountains on which Kangene skulks out of sight of Mazitu, flows into the Lue, and north of that we have the Mando, a little stream flowing into the Bua. The rivulets on the west flow in deep defiles, and the elevation on which we travel makes it certain that no water can come from the lower lands on the west. It seems that the Portuguese, in traveling to Casembe, did not inquire of the people where the streams they crossed went, for they are often wrongly put, and indicate the direction only in which they appeared to be flowing at their crossing places. The natives have a good idea generally of the rivers into which the streams flow, though they are very deficient in information as to the condition of the people that live on their banks. Some of the Portuguese questions must have been asked through slaves, who would show no hesitation in answering. Machinga or Machinga means mountains only. Once or twice it is put down Saxa de Machinga or Makanga, which translated from the native tongue means rocks of mountains or mountains of rocks. 10th November 1866. We found the people on the Mando to be Chawo or Ajawa, but not of the Wayu race. They are Manganja, and this is a village of smiths. We got 5 men readily to go back and bring up our loads, and the sound of the hammer is constant, showing a great deal of industry. They combine agriculture and hunting with nets with their handicraft. A herd of buffaloes came near the village, and I went and shot one, thus procuring a supply of meat for the whole party and villagers too. The hammer which we hear from dawn till sunset is a large stone, bound with the strong inner bark of a tree, and loops left which form handles. 2 pieces of bark form the tongs, and a big stone sunk into the ground the anvil. They make several hoes in a day, and the metal is very good. It is all from yellow hematite, which abounds all over this part of the country. The bellows consist of 2 goat skins with sticks at the open ends, which are opened and shut at every blast. 13th November 1866. A lion came last night and gave a growl or 2 on finding he could not get our meat. A man had lent us a hunting net to protect it, and us, from intruders of this sort. The people kept up a shouting for hours afterwards in order to keep him away by the human voice. We might have gone on, but I had a galled heel from new shoes. Wild figs are rather nice when quite ripe. 14th November 1866. We marched northwards round the end of Chisia Hill and remained for the night at a blacksmith's, or rather founder's village. The two occupations of founders and smith are always united, and boys taught to be smiths in Europe or India would find themselves useless if unable to smelt the ore. A good portion of the trees of the country have been cut down for charcoal, and those which now spring up are small. Certain fruit trees alone are left. The long slopes on the undulating country, clothed with fresh foliage, look very beautiful. The young trees alternate with patches of yellow grass not yet burned. The hills are covered with a thick mantle of small green trees, with, as usual, large ones at intervals. The people at Calambi, on the Mando, where we spent 4 days, had once a stockade of wild fig, Ficus indica, and euphorbia round their village, which has a running rill on each side of it. But the trees which enabled them to withstand a siege by Mazitu fell before elephants and buffaloes during a temporary absence of the villagers. The remains of the stockade are all around it yet. Lions sometimes enter huts by breaking through the roof. Elephants certainly do, for we saw a roof destroyed by one. The only chance for the inmates is to drive a spear into the belly of the beast while so engaged. A man came and reported the Mazitu to be at Chanyandula's village, where we are going. The headman advised remaining at his village till we saw whether they came this way or went by another path. The women were sent away, but the men went on with their employments. 2 proceeded with the building of a furnace on an ant-hill, where they are almost always placed, and they keep a lookout while working. We have the protection of an all-embracing providence, and trust that He, whose care of His people exceeds all that our utmost self-love can attain, will shield us and make our way prosperous. 16th November 1866. An elephant came near enough last night to scream at us, but passed on, warned perhaps by the shouting of the villagers not to meddle with man. No Mazitu having come, we marched on and crossed the Bua, 8 yards wide and knee-deep. It rises in the northern hills a little beyond Kenyandula's village, winds round his mountains, and away to the east. The scenery among the mountains is very lovely. They are covered with a close mantle of green, with here and there red and light-colored patches, showing where grass has been burned off recently and the red clay soil is exposed. The lighter portions are unburned grass or rocks. Large trees are here more numerous and give an agreeable change of contour to the valleys and ridges of the hills. The boughs of many still retain a tinge of red from young leaves. We came to the Bua again before reaching the Kanyenje, as Kenyandula's place is called. The iron trade must have been carried on for an immense time in this country, for one cannot go a quarter of a mile without meeting pieces of slag and broken pots, calcined pipes, and fragments of the furnaces, which are converted by the fire into brick. It is curious that the large stone sledgehammers now in use are not called by the name stone hammers, but by a distinct word, kama. Nyundo is one made out of iron. When we arrived at Kanyenje, Kenyandula was out collecting charcoal. He sent a party of men to ask if we should remain next day. An old, unintellectual-looking man was among the number sent, who had 27 rings of an elephant's skin on his arm, all killed by himself with the spear alone. He had given up fighting elephants since the Mazitu came, whom we heard had passed away to the southeast of this place, taking all the crops of last year, and the chief alone has food. He gave us some, which was very acceptable, as we got none at the 2 villages south of this. Kenyandula came himself in the evening, an active, stern-looking man, but we got on very well with him. The people say that they were taught to smelt iron by Chimsumpi, which is the name of Mulungu, God, and that they came from Lake Nyasa originally. If so, they are greatly inferior to the Manganja on the lake in pottery, for the fragments as well as modern whole vessels are very coarse. The ornamentation is omitted or merely dots. They never heard of aerolites, but no hail. I notice here that the tree mfu or mo, having sweet-scented leaves, yields an edible plum in clusters. Buabois is another edible fruit tree with palmated leaves. Mbeu is a climbing arboraceous plant and yields a very pleasant fruit, which tastes like gooseberries. Its seeds are very minute. 18th and 19th November 1866. Rain fell heavily yesterday afternoon and was very threatening today. We remain to sew a calico tent. 20th November 1866. Kenyandula came with 3 carriers this morning instead of 5, and joined them in demanding prepayment. It was natural for him to side with them, as they have more power than he has. In fact, the chiefs in these parts all court their people, and he could feel more interest in them than in an entire stranger whom he might never see again. However, we came on without his people, leaving 2 to guard the loads. About 4 miles up the valley, we came to a village named Kenyanjere Mapanda, at the fountain eye of the Bua, and thence sent men back for the loads, while we had the shelter of good huts during a heavy thunder shower, and made us willing to remain all night. The valley is lovely in the extreme. The mountains on each side are gently rounded, and, as usual, covered over with tree foliage, except where the red soil is exposed by recent grass burnings. Quartz rocks jut out, and much drift of that material has been carried down by the gullies into the bottom. These gullies being in compact clay, the water has but little power of erosion, so they are worn deep but narrow. Some fragments of the titaniferous iron core, with hematite changed by heat and magnetic, lay in the gully, which had worn itself a channel on the north side of the village. The Bua, like most African streams whose sources I have seen, rises in an oozy, boggy spot. Another stream, the Tembwe, rises near the same spot and flows northwest into the Luangwa. We saw charre palms in its bed. 21st November 1866. We left Bua Fountain, latitude 30 degrees 40 minutes south, and made a short march to Mokatoba, a stockaded village where the people refused to admit us till the headman came. They have a little food here and sold us some. We have been rather short commons for some time, and this made our detention agreeable. We rose a little in altitude after leaving this morning, then, though in the same valley, made a little descent towards the north-northwest. High winds came driving over the eastern range, which is called Machinje, and bring large masses of clouds, which are the rain-givers. They seem to come from the southeast. The scenery of the valley is lovely and rich in the extreme. All the foliage is fresh, washed, and clean. Young herbage is bursting through the ground. The air is deliciously cool, and the birds are singing joyfully. One, called Mzee, is a good songster with a loud, melodious voice. Large game abounds, but we do not meet with it. We are making our way slowly to the north, where food is said to be abundant. I divided about 50 pounds of powder among the people of my following to shoot with, and to buy goats or other food as we could. This reduces our extra loads to 3, 4 just now, Simon being sick again. He rubbed goat's fat on a blistered surface and caused an eruption of pimples. Mem. The people assent by lifting up the head instead of nodding it down as we do. Deaf mutes are said to do the same. 22nd November 1866. Leaving Mokataba village and proceeding down the valley, which on the north is shut up apparently by a mountain called Kokwe, we crossed the Kasamba about 2 miles from Mokatoba, and yet found it, though so near its source, 4 yards wide and knee-deep. Its source is about a mile above Mokatoba, in the same valley, with the Bua and Tembwe. We were told that elephants were near, and we saw where they had been an hour before, but after seeking about could not find them. An old man in the deep defile between Kokwe and Yasika mountains pointed to the latter and said, "Elephants? Why, there they are. Elephants or tusks, walking on foot, are never absent." But though we were eager for flesh, we could not give him credit, and went down the defile which gives rise to the Sindili River. Where we crossed it in the defile, it was a mere rill, having large trees along its banks, yet it is said to go to the Luanga of Zumbo, northwest or north-northwest. We were now, in fact, upon the slope which inclines to that river, and made a rapid descent in altitude. We reached Salubi's village on the base of a rocky detached hill. No food to be had, all taken by Mazitu, so Salubi gave me some masuko fruit instead. They find that they can keep the Mazitu off by going up a rocky eminence and hurling stones and arrows down on the invaders. They can defend themselves also by stockades, and these are becoming very general. On leaving Salubi's village, we went to a range of hills, and after passing through, found that we had a comparatively level country on the north. It would be called a well-wooded country if we looked at it only from a distance. It is formed into long ridges, all green and wooded, but clumps of large trees, where villages have been, or are still situated, show that the sylvan foliage around and over the whole country is that of mere hop poles. The whole of this upland region might be called woody, if we bear in mind that where the population is dense and has been long undisturbed, the trees are cut down to the size of low bush. Large districts are kept to about the size of hop poles, growing on pollards 3 or 4 feet from the ground, by charcoal burners, who in all instances are smiths too. On reaching Zior's village on the Lukwasa, we found it stockaded and stagnant pools round 3 sides of it. The Mazitu had come, pillaged all the surrounding villages, looked at this, and then went away, so the people had food to sell. They here call themselves Achiwa, and have a different marking from the Atimboka. The men have the hair dressed as if a number of the hairs of elephants' tails were stuck around the head. The women wear a small lip ring and a straw or piece of stick in the lower lip, which dangles down about level with the lower ridge of the chin. Their clothing in front is very scanty. The men know nothing of distant places, the Manganja being very stay-at-home people. The stockades are crowded with huts, and the children have but small room to play in the narrow spaces between. 25th November 1866, Sunday at Zaores. The villagers thought we prayed for rain, which was much needed. The cracks in the soil have not yet come together by the swelling of soil produced by moisture. I disabused their minds about rain-making prayers and found the headman intelligent. I did not intend to notice the Lakuzwa. It is such a contemptible little rill, and not at present running, but in going to our next point, Mapande's village, we go along its valley and cross it several times as it makes for the Luanga in the north. The valley is of rich, dark red loam, and so many lilies of the amaryllis kind have established themselves as completely to mask the color of the soil. They form a covering of pure white where the land has been cleared by the hoe. As we go along this valley to the Luanga, we descend in altitude. It is said to rise at Nombe Rume, as we formerly heard. 27th November 1866. Zaores people would not carry without prepayment, so we left our extra loads as usual and went on, sending men back for them. These, however, did not come till the 27th, and then 2 of my men got fever. I groan in spirit and do not know how to make our gear into 9 loads only. It is the knowledge that we shall be detained some 2 or 3 months during the heavy rains that makes me cleave to it as means of support. Advantage has been taken by the people of spots where the Lakuzwa goes around 3 parts of a circle to erect their stockaded villages. This is the case here, and the water being stagnant engenders disease. The country abounds in fine, light blue flowering perennial pea, which the people make use of as a relish. At present the blossoms only are collected and boiled. In acquiring the name Chilobe, the men asked me if we had none in our country. On replying in the negative, they looked with pity on us. What a wretched country not to have Chilobe! It is on the highlands above. We never saw it elsewhere. Another species of pea, Chilobe wiza, with reddish flowers, is eaten in the same way, but it has spread but little in comparison. It is worth remarking that porridge of maize or sorghum is never offered without some pulse, beans, or bean leaves, or flowers. They seem to feel the need of it or of pulse, which is richer in flesh formers than the porridge. Last night, a loud clapping of hands by the men was followed by several half-suppressed screams by a woman. They were quite eldritch, as if she could not get them out. Then succeeded a lot of utterances as if she were in ecstasy, to which a man responded, "Moio, moio." The utterances, so far as I could catch, were in 5-syllable snatches, abrupt and labored. I wondered if this bubbling or boiling over has been preserved as the form in which the true prophets of old gave forth their burdens. One sentence frequently repeated towards the close of the effusion was "Linyama uta," flesh of the bow, showing that the pythoness loved venison killed by the bow. The people applauded and attended, hoping, I suppose, that rain would follow her efforts. Next day she was duly honored by drumming and dancing. Prevalent beliefs seem to be persistent in certain tribes. That strange idea of property in man that permits him to be sold to another is among the Arabs, Manganja, Makoa, Wayu, but not among Kafirs or Zulus and Bechuanas. If we exclude the Arabs, 2 families of African alone are slavers on the east side of the continent. 30th November 1866. We marched to Chalundas or Imboras, still on the Lakuzwa, now a sand stream about 20 yards wide, with pools in its bed. Its course is pretty much north or north-northwest. We are now near the Luanga country, covered with a dense dwarf forest, and the people collected in stockades. This village is on a tongue of land between Lakuzwa and another sluggish rivulet, chosen for its strength. It is close to a hill named Chipemba, and there are ranges of hills both east and west in the distance. Mbora came to visit us soon after we arrived, a tall man with a Yankee face. He was very much tickled when asked if he were a Mutuboka. After indulging in laughter at the idea of being one of such a small tribe of Manganja, he said proudly that he belonged to the Achua, who inhabited all the country to which I was going. They are generally smiths. A mass of iron had just been brought into him from some outlying furnaces. It is made into hose, which are sold for native cloths down the Luanga. 3rd December, 1866. March through a hilly country covered with dwarf forest to Kande's village, still on the Lakuzwa. We made some westing. The village was surrounded by a dense hedge of bamboo and a species of bushy fig that loves edges of water-bearing streams. It is not found where the moisture is not perennial. Kande is a fine, tall smith. I asked him if he knew his antecedents. He said that he had been bought by Babisa at Chipeta and left at Chalundas and therefore belonged to no one. 2 Wayu now volunteered to go on with us, as they declared their masters were killed by the Mazitu, and Kande seemed to confirm them. We let them join. In general, runaway slaves are bad characters, but these 2 seem good men, and we want them to fill up our complement. Another volunteer we employ as a goat herd. A continuous tap-tapping in the villages shows that bark cloth is being made. The bark, on being removed from the tree, is steeped in water, or in a black muddy hole, till the outer of the 2 inner barks can be separated. Then commences the tapping with a mallet to separate and soften the fibers. The head of this is often of ebony, with the face cut into small furrows, which without breaking, separate and soften the fibers. 4th December, 1866. Marched westwards over a hilly dwarf forest-covered country. As we advanced, trees increased in size, but no people inhabited it. We spent a miserable night at Katete, wetted by a heavy thunder shower, which lasted a good while. Morning, 5th December, muggy, clouded all over, and rolling thunder in the distance. Went 3 hours with, for a wonder, no water, but made westing chiefly, and got on to the Lakuzwa again. All the people are collected on it. 6th December, 1866, too ill to march. 7th December, 1866. Went on and passed Masumbe's village, also protected by bamboos, and came to the hill Maparwe, with the village perched on its northern base and well up its sides. The Babisa have begun to imitate the Mazitu by attacking and plundering Manganja villages. Mwasi's brother was so attacked, and now is here and eager to attack in return. In various villages we have observed miniature huts about 2 feet high, very neatly thatched and plastered. Here we notice them in dozens. On inquiring, we were told that when a child or relative dies, one is made, and when any pleasant food is cooked or beer brewed, a little is placed in the tiny hut for the departed soul, which is believed to enjoy it. The Lakuzwa is here some 50 yards wide and running. Numerous large pit holes in the fine-grained schist in its bed show that much water has flown in it. 8th December, 1866. A kind of bean called chiteta is eaten here. It is an old acquaintance in the Bechuana country, where it is called mositsane, and is a mere plant. Here it becomes a tree from 15 to 20 feet high. The root is used for tanning, the bean is pounded and then put into a sieve of bark cloth to extract, by repeated washings, the excessively astringent matter it contains. Where the people have plenty of water, as here, it is used copiously in various processes. Among Bechuanas it is scarce, and its many uses unknown. The pod becomes from 15 to 18 inches long and an inch in diameter. 9th December, 1866. A poor child whose mother had died was unprovided for. No one, not a relative, will nurse another's child. It called out piteously for its mother by name, and the women, like the servants in the case of the poet Cowper when a child, said, "She is coming. I gave it a piece of bread, but it was far too gone, and is dead today." An alarm of Mazitu sent all the villagers up the sides of Mpware this morning. The affair was a chase of a hyena, but everything is Mazitu. The Babisa come here, but were surrounded and nearly all cut off. Moasi was so eager to be off with the party to return the attack on the Mazitu that when deputed by the headman to give us a guide, he got the man to turn at the first village, so we had to go on without guides and made about due north. 11th December, 1866. We are now detained in the forest at a place called Conde Forest by set-in rains. It rains every day and generally in the afternoon, but the country is not wetted till the set-in rains commence. The cracks in the soil then fill up and everything rushes up with astonishing rapidity. The grass is quite crisp and soft. After the fine-grained schist, we came on granite with large flakes of talc in it. This forest is of good-sized trees, many of them mapane. The birds now make much melody and noise, all intent on building. 12th December, 1866. Across an undulating forest country north, we got a man to show us the way, if a pathless forest can be so called. We used a game path as long as it ran north, but left it when it deviated, and rested under a baobab tree with a marabou's nest, a bundle of sticks on a branch. The young ones uttered a hard chuck-chuck when the old ones flew over them. A sunbird, with bright scarlet throat and breast, had its nest on another branch. It was formed like the weaver's nest, but without a tube. I observed the dam picking out insects from the bark and leaves of the baobab, keeping on the wing the while. It would thus appear to be insectivorous as well as a honeybibber. Much spoor of elands, zebras, gnus, camas, pallas, buffaloes, reed bucks with tsetse and their parasites. 13th December, 1866. Reached the Tokasusi, which is said to rise at Nombe Rume, about 20 yards wide and knee-deep, swollen by the rains. It had left a cake of black, tenacious mud on its banks. Here I got a pala antelope and a very strange flower called katende, which was a whorl of 72 flowers sprung from a flat, round root, but it cannot be described. Our guide would have crossed the Tokasusi, which was running northwest to join the Luanga, and then gone to that river. But when we have any difficulty, the lazies exhibit themselves. We had no grain, and 3 remained behind, spending 4 hours at what we did in an hour and a quarter. Our guide became tired and turned, not before securing another, but he would not go over the Luangwa. No one likes to go out of his own country. He would go westwards to Miranda's and nowhere else. A set-in rain came on after dark, and we went on through slush, the trees sending down heavier drops than the showers as we neared the Luangwa. We forded several deep gullies, all flowing north or northwest into it. The paths were running with water, and when we emerged from the large mapane forest, we came on the plain of excessively adhesive mud, on which Miranda's stronghold stands on the left bank of the Luanga, here a good-sized river. The people were all afraid of us, and we were mortified to find that food is scarce. The Mazitu have been here 3 times, and the fear they have inspired, though they were successfully repelled, has prevented agricultural operations from being carried on. Mem. A flake of reed is often used in surgical operations among the natives as being sharper than their knives. End of chapter 6.